Hello, greetings from San Marcos, Texas. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you using this video message. My topic for you today is Service Ecosystem Health, the ServiceCos perspective on accelerating social innovation. And I've got 5 topics for you. I'll speak about my perspective in service, ServiceCos perspective. Then I'll speak about accelerating social innovation. What can we do? Then I'll look at service ecosystem health, which I think is a key way of accelerating social innovation. And then I'll finish with where are we now? So I'm going to begin with my perspective based on my experiences as one of the pioneers of the service research field. And I did a TEDx talk at my university. I'm going to make 3 observations from that talk. The talk was called How Serving Each Other Can Save Humanity. And that was a talk I gave for Texas State University on February 15th in 2020. And it was based on my 40 years of service thinking and service research at the time. I've actually gone further than that now, of course. I showed this photo. It's called Earthrise 1968. That's what it's been known as ever since it was taken in 1968. I was 15 years old in December when that photo was taken. And that photo popularized the phrase Spaceship Earth. And in my TEDx talk, I made the observation that you can see in the slide. I said, can we, the people of Earth, rise? Can we rise to fairness by helping each other? And I've thought all these many years that as a species, we don't work well together, but we should. We should be able to treat each other fairly. What can be done? And that's really guided my direction throughout my life. The second observation from my TEDx talk is a point I made about the collaboration threshold, as I called it. I pointed out that services evolved from families to tribes to villages. Those are the service systems we created back before we had written records that got our species to the point that we learned how to create writing systems and that we could record what we'd learned and share it. So then we've evolved in our history into cities and nations, much more complex service systems, corporations, and all kinds of organizations. But we struggle to collaborate in the complexity of those larger, more complex systems. That, I think, is a key challenge for us, complexity and collaboration in complex systems. And the third observation I made in that talk is that our species won't survive if we don't find new ways to help each other. I think we need new ways. The old ways are not working, as I will try to show you very shortly. And that gets me to ServiceCos perspective. So with ServiceCos perspective, I should at first make sure that even though some of you know more about ServiceCos, I never try to assume that everyone knows. So our name ServiceCos is a contraction of serving humanity through collaboration, ServiceCos. And ServiceCos is a service research collaborative for diagnosing and treating humanity's service system problems. And it's fundamentally based on transformative service research. I was fortunate to be part of the groups that have been heavily involved in creating the foundations of transformative service research. And from every intention I had from the beginning with ServiceCos, it's been based upon TSR, as we call it. ServiceCos believes that service researchers are uniquely positioned to help accelerate social innovation and human symbiosis. We can accelerate it, we think. But what is the purpose of service research? Are we servants of industry or are we guides for humanity? And fundamentally, TSR was really getting at that same point. When we, as a group, were starting to talk about improving human well-being, well, that isn't automatically something that is just a servants of industry logic. It's bigger than that. And I'm convinced, and ServiceCos is convinced, that we should really seek to be guides for humanity, not just corporations. So how can we transform service research? This is really at the heart of what ServiceCos is trying to do. We're trying to help expand from customer satisfaction to human well-being. And of course, human well-being is the key improving human well-being line and logic of TSR. Second, we're trying to help escape the preposition to, and embrace the preposition with. Prepositions describe interactions. They're short words that have great power because they capture an interactive effect between humans. And we don't mean just B2C or B2B or A to A, as Vargo and Lush would call it, interactions. We think it should be human with human interactions, or HWH. We think it's with, but we think it's should be seen as more of an equal relationship as opposed to something being done to someone else. With captures co-creation better, certainly. And third, we think we should shift from microeconomics to macro health. In other words, from organizations to society. Those are three things we think we should be doing to transform service research. Fundamentally, if we do that, we will get to a point where, and like in my TEDx talk, we will be serving each other. It will be a human with human interaction where we can accomplish mutual symbiosis, where we would actually not have some of the unusual unfairness and inequality problems that we seem to regularly have in human societies. Those are ineffective human systems. We focus too much on efficiency, but we forget the effectiveness. If we have people starving, if we have people in very, very miserable circumstances, that's ineffective. Our systems are ineffective. So ServiceCos' perspective is that we need to escape an implicit logic. And that implicit logic is conflict. Human history has been written as a story of great men, of dominance and of war. And our species has perfected self-destructive oppositional logic. And I saw it during my childhood too. It was known as MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction, or MAD, which I think fits it rather well if you just think of what the word MAD normally means. The nuclear arms race during the Cold War of the 20th century reached the logical result of such nonsense. And that happened during my childhood, where the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and the United States were in a nuclear arms race, and they finally reached the point that they realized that all they could do was destroy the planet, not just the other country, that was fundamentally the power of nuclear weapons. And that was when they finally stepped back from mutual assured destruction. I think climate change is creating a 21st century MAD scenario with no easy way to step back from the edge of disaster, because we have hundreds of countries all doing independent decision making that is pushing us closer to the brink of disaster. And we have never yet found a way to fundamentally change that dynamic and as a world step back from disaster. The Paris Climate Agreement was the closest, but of course many things went wrong after that agreement was set. We are in trouble as a species. So how do we prevent MAD? We need a new logic to stop this madness. Our survival depends on it. Collaboration is our best hope. We need mutual assured collaboration, or as I'm calling it, MAC. We need to adopt collaboration as the foundational logic for human progress. And I'm going to be expanding on collaboration then. So here's collaboration itself. Collaboration occurs when people eagerly engage in working with each other. And it is based on shared trust. It's fundamentally a key issue with human interactions, that the best collaboration possible requires shared trust. We have a hard time working with anybody if we don't have trust in the relationship, and collaboration reaches higher levels of trust. Fundamentally, service occurs in interactions. And basically, these are social interactions, and these are monetary interactions. Those are our typical groupings. We tend to separate those, and I'm convinced that that's probably a bad logic. We should probably just look at those as human interactions and not get too distracted as to whether or not money changed hands or didn't change hands. I think there's a hierarchy of human interactions. And the hierarchy would be at the bottom with conflict, that implicit logic I was just talking about. And then competition would be above that. Competition's better because no one dies in competition if you do competition right versus conflict. And of course there's a different kind of conflict, which is just arguing. And our political systems in most democracies even are based upon a conflict logic of winners and losers in the political battles. That still causes problems, because then one side wins, the other side loses, and they're eager to then beat the other. It's sort of competition as opposed to conflict, because people aren't dying, but it's still not helping us much. And then there's cooperation. Well, that's better, but cooperation isn't always mutual in benefits. Cooperation can be things where somebody's being taken advantage of, but they cooperate because they stand to lose more than gain if they don't cooperate. Collaboration is the highest form of collaboration because it respects humans and works together with humans. That's what we need. We need that level. And that's where I get to accelerating social innovation, because this is where I can draw on an article that I worked on with colleagues. That article is Systematic Social Innovation, Co-Creating a Future Where Humans and All Life Thrive. It's an article that was published in the Humanistic Management Journal, and I should point out that I didn't know anybody in this group that I was going to be part of. I was asked to be the leader of the group. Normally when I've done research projects, I've known at least some of the people in the group, and typically have written with some of them. I just know them. In this case, I didn't know anybody in this group. I'd never written with any of them, of course, that goes with it. And I was certainly going into this process thinking, well, this could go well, but who knows? I just had no idea. I have to say, this was one of the most remarkable and fun collaborations I've ever been part of. It was delightfully collaborative in many, many ways, because it seemed like everybody just kept throwing more energy and sparks into the conversation. There was good collaboration, and we reached, I think, some very valuable ideas. We came up with the idea that society is at a crossroads. Its interconnected systems, radical transparency, and rapidly increasing sophistication in skills and communications and technologies provide a unique context for fostering social innovation at planetary scale. That was our fundamental idea, that opportunity for accelerating. And Alessandro, one of the co-authors, was the key person who brought this idea to us. And he had some great examples that we built into our paper, about how previously humans have been getting better at accelerating innovations, and we think it can continue if we push it. So that's where we got to the idea of proposing the highest form of collaboration should be called transformative collaboration. So what we're saying is not just collaboration, but we think we can label something that is the best form, and we would call it transformative collaboration, when all participants are able to make contributions at their full human potential. Full human potential. In other words, that they've had that opportunity at their full human potential. Too often, too many human interactions, somebody's being taken advantage of by someone else, and they never have an opportunity to contribute at their full human potential. One of the ideas that was in our paper was the idea of levels of analysis for systemic social innovation. We had a micro level in which we proposed the role there would be collaborative leaders. We had a meso level, which would be collaborative organizations. And then we had a macro level for the ecosystem itself. And we argued that transformative collaboration could occur across these levels. And it requires the systems to get better and better at collaborating. But accelerating innovation is a key logic that we think we need to figure out as a species. We need to figure out how to do this. So now that gets me to service ecosystem health, because this is an attempt on my part to help push things forward with my colleague Linda Alkire. Linda Alkire and I decided we would write this paper called Service Ecosystem Health. It's a transformative approach to elevating service science. And I should point out this article was just published just a few weeks ago in Service Science. It just recently came out. And I'm going to share a little bit from this article for you, because it really is on the same wavelength in terms of accelerating things, but it's trying to look at things from a larger perspective. So here is the general idea, the service ecosystem health idea. The metaphor contributes a logic for enabling service science to serve the full spectrum of human needs in our human ecology. So basically in the diagram there, we've got a personal health level at the center. In other words, there's always personal health. We all know about that. There's a public health level that affects all of the people in a society, whether it be a city or a nation or whatever else. And then there's a planetary health level in which we would actually get to the health effects of poor air quality, poor water quality, and other sorts of things. So 3 levels, micro, meso, macro levels. These all 3, we think, are critical to understanding the full spectrum of human needs. And we should be thinking in service, we think, about service systems, service ecosystems from a health perspective. So we built this service ecosystem health metaphor by synthesizing 5 research threads, starting with public health, which is, of course, a major topic in our COVID crisis that we're in now. Public health is being disrespected across so much of the world, where public health has actually gotten our species to longer lifespans. Public health is a key factor in that, including things like clean water, so that people had better sanitation in so many parts of the world. If they don't have clean water, well, you're not going to get too far on sanitation, will you? Then we built it on syndemic theory, we built it on human ecology, we built it on ecosystem health, and we built it on planetary health. And I don't have enough time to get into all of those 5 topic areas, but they're each large literature bodies of literature, each having a different but related thread of understanding of health context, but none of them specific to service. That's what we were trying to bring in all of these ideas into our thinking about service. So based on this synthesis, the Goldilocks civilization thought experiment was proposed. So let me tell you about the thought experiment. It was inspired by these recent books that I'm showing on the slide here. The first one's Together, written by Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General of the United States, and actually he's back as the Surgeon General of the United States at a great time. The second book is Humankind by Rutger Bregman. Both of those books were very influential. And the third book, Pro-Social, is really the most influential of the 3 because we were able to build key parts of our logic on the Goldilocks civilization, based upon that third book, Pro-Social. So I'm going to expand on it in just a little bit. But all 3 of those books helped inspire our thinking. So here's what we described our Goldilocks civilization thought experiment as. We described it as reimagining human service ecosystems to expand their ability to support individual human life, human societies, and the biodiversity of planet Earth. And in this thought experiment, the primary challenge is protecting the natural rights of individuals, encouraging the vigor of human societies, and nurturing the planetary health of life on Earth. Now that's obviously thinking much bigger about service ecosystems than perhaps others have. And we think it can help us as a species if we can adopt that idea and try to achieve a Goldilocks civilization. So a little bit more then, we seek to imagine a people-centered civilization and envision the conditions required to elevate human experience. And a Goldilocks civilization is possible because of the rapid evolution of computer technology. We think our computer technology can help do a lot of the hard work of communicating and connecting and spurring the acceleration. And third, to guide our Goldilocks civilization, we propose a logic that is based on Elinor Ostrom's Nobel Prize-winning work on common pool resources that was recently augmented by Atkins et al., and that's the book that I've already touched on, and I'm going to show you more about it momentarily. It's pro-social, and basically I'm going to talk about the pro-social processes in this book. Atkins, Wilson, and Hayes are the 3 authors of this book. They developed what they call Core Design Principles 2.0, which they basically are generalizing Elinor Ostrom's core design principles to broader contexts, and they've really worked hard at this. I've been very impressed with their work. Here's just a little bit more about it. Basically, it represents a tested approach to self-governance, because they've tested it now multiple times, that can be scaled upwards to larger and larger groups. And I'm especially intrigued and excited about their work on scaling it up, because it addresses crossing the complexity threshold I identified in my TEDx talk. We have to get better at working in larger groups if we want to protect our species and our planet. So, designing for a Goldilocks civilization was the last key part of our article on service ecosystem health. We basically argued that 2 key things are essential. First is service design, and here I'm going to only reference just briefly 2 key service design publications. The first is Leah Patricio et al. 2011. It's on multi-level service design that's particularly relevant to the private, public, and planetary health levels of the service ecosystem health perspective. That multi-level logic is perfectly logical fit with the ideas we're talking about for service ecosystem health. The second article is by Vink et al. From 2021, very recent, in which they talk about service ecosystem design. It's particularly relevant to optimizing human service systems. We don't have to put up with things. We could design better systems, and we should. And both of those articles, we think, are two inspiring articles that can help. There's many other great service design publications. We're just picking those two for an illustration. And the next point, then, is the role of collaboration. We believe that service scientists should be at the forefront in proposing and developing collaborative, systematic service innovations on behalf of our imperiled human ecology. We think collaboration, of course, is the essential glue to make a Goldilocks civilization possible. And this is where the pro-social ideas adapted from Eleanor Ostrom's work are really very exciting. So where are we now? Our human service ecosystem is in crisis. It's fundamentally in crisis. And that's clearly bothering most everybody on the planet. I haven't talked to anybody in the last 2 years of COVID crisis that doesn't say, well, what a mess the world is. So we're living in a world of fear, I would argue. I would argue that that fear is based upon climate change. And it's not that automatically people are afraid of fear, it's that people are afraid of the climate scientists in some cases. There are people who are spreading misinformation about climate change. But many of us who really have been paying attention to the climate science and believe the science are very alarmed about how bad things look. They do look quite bad. And then the second problem that we all have been living with for more than 2 years, going on 3 years soon, of COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic and the fear being caused by that and all the anti-masking, anti-vaccination, all these many fears of the vaccines, fears of the disease. Fear is a dangerous thing for humans. Which gets to the third problem, which I would, from my thinking, argue is the most fundamental of it all, and that is that I think we're dealing with a scenario of massive misinformation tied to the internet and tied to social media. Misinformation can spread faster than it ever could in human history. And we're really at an unfortunate time because every single communication technology that we've ever as a species had available to us has created new opportunities for confusion. The printing press created new opportunities for confusion. The radio systems where people could listen to the radio, that created new opportunities for confusion and propaganda. Television created new opportunities for confusion. And then the internet, and then social media on top of it. And social media, if you go back and look at all the early things said about social media was going to unify the planet. Boy, are we far from that goal. We are far from unifying the planet. Just being able to communicate only makes it easy to spread misinformation. We have to learn how to collaborate if we're going to get to the point of getting out of this trap. And that collaboration means overcoming the massive misinformation. And then we might be able to work on fully getting out of the pandemic and fully getting out of the climate change crisis that we're in. We are definitely running out of time. We're standing at the crossroads. Human society has reached a crossroads. We can destroy life itself, or we can regenerate human potential. And you'll notice that my image there doesn't show arrows going any particular direction. That's sort of random. And I really think that's part of our problem right now. There's so much confusion. No one's quite sure which way to go. But if we don't go together in a direction that helps us regenerate human potential, we are in big trouble. And I think more and more of us are increasingly aware of that. And I certainly hope that our service research community is not only aware of it, but interested in helping. And I hope we will choose regeneration. That's my key message for you today. It's been a pleasure sharing this talk, even though it's by video. Better than nothing, of course. And I'll finish up with just a slide saying thank you. And we'll switch to a question and answer session in which I will come into the room with you via a live feed instead of video. And we'll continue with that. So thank you very much.
Yep. Yes, thank you for the great presentation. I think that we can now open for any questions from the audience.
All right, great.
Yes, please.
Hi. How could we combine this service collaboration with private interests that sometimes are clearly against that kind of public interest?
I'm not sure I understood the second part of the question. Sorry.
Yeah, I said how this service collaboration can be combined with the private interest that sometimes is against the public commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. I think I finally understand what you meant. Obviously, private interests, private corporations are a significant part of our world and a part of our economy in the world. I until recently was more pessimistic about corporations than I am now. One of the topics that I wanted to include in my talk was about B corporations, or what they're called more often as benefit corporations. Benefit corporations are organizations that are required to look at a larger view of stakeholders than just shareholders. And by doing that, they are trying to serve the needs of customers, needs of workers, the needs of the community, and the needs of the environment. And there currently are a little more than 4,000 B corporations, benefit corporations worldwide. That's a small start, but they are moving fast. And in fact, I have shifted my entire teaching of my capstone marketing classes that I teach, having my students do benefit corporation projects, developing ideas for benefit corporations. And I have to say, they have been very, very receptive to the ideas. They're hoping to live on this planet long after I'm dead. They should. But at this point, things look pretty bad if you're a college student looking at climate change, looking at the COVID crisis and all the other problems of the world. So that they've been very receptive. But I do think private corporations need to change. Benefit corporations, to me, are one of the best ways that they have a model, a proven model now for change.
Thank you. More questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for an interesting presentation, Rick. My question is going on, you say that this about social media, and that is far from unifying, and we can definitely agree on that, but also my thoughts is here that often these social media that is far from unifying is also controlled by algorithms that kind of control the conversation going on here. At the same time, we put a lot of faith in, for example, artificial intelligence and other kinds of algorithms for solving a lot of these complexities and understanding complexities. So my question is simply, what is your perspective on these aspects?
Well, I would have to thank you for the question. I would have to start with saying that all of the technology that we are using today that relies on artificial intelligence instead of human intelligence worries me greatly. Because there are so many ways that artificial intelligence can do things without any of the understanding that any human has. Any human has the ability to make decisions that we still don't know how to teach an artificial intelligence algorithm. And maybe someday we can actually get true artificial intelligence. But all we now really have is automated dumb machines. And automated dumb machines will doom us in ways that we are only already seeing, but it'll get worse. I mean, the very fact that social media is operating with artificial intelligence instead of humans deciding, is this a dangerous message or not, is just one of the many examples of automating things when maybe we should step back from the edge of stupidity and quit pretending that our tools are that intelligent and use them more wisely. We are a species that thinks we're wise, and so now we think our technology is wise. We aren't that wise, and our technology is definitely stupider than we are. I don't know what else to say but that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we have, yes, please, Chris.
Where do politicians come in this? You listed the things we're afraid of. A lot of people I talk to are much more afraid of the military. They're afraid that China's about to invade Taiwan, Russia's about to invade Ukraine, and all these things happening. Iran wants to desperate to develop a nuclear capability. These scare me a hell of a lot more than climate change, to be honest. Therefore, where do the things you're talking about address these sorts of things?
Thank you for that question. I agree with your worries about the political issues completely. We live in a world with political systems that vary from remarkably dangerous to mildly dangerous. But I can't think of a single country that couldn't be described as mildly dangerous. Mildly dangerous to its own people is what I mean. And worse, inside the typical democracy, the logic is a logic of conflict, of winners and losers inside the system. And I elaborate on some of that in my special session coming up, but basically, we need to escape a conflict logic and get to a collaboration logic. And the United States is a perfect example of how you could design a country to fail. We have two parties. The two parties are now to the point that they nearly hate each other, and some do hate each other. There isn't any good future for the United States politically. On the path the United States is on, we are already a failed democracy. The question is, how fast does that failure continue? So I share your worries about the politics. And social media is only flames of that. But the politicians are the ones with fingers on the triggers, fingers on the nuclear button. The ones who can really cause mass loss of life. And that should worry us.
Okay, so I think we have 1 minute left, so maybe I would like to just ask for a quick question for a quick answer, just to finish in a more positive tone. Is what can we do as researchers? What can the service research community do to make things better? I know the challenges are big, but what can we do?
Thank you, Leah. Well, I'll try to give a quick answer to that. I think the main thing I would argue goes back to the founding of the TSR movement, Transformative Service Research Movement. Basically, the TSR movement is focusing on improving human well-being. We need more researchers finding topics where they can improve human well-being and pursuing those topics. ServiceCos was founded on the TSR logic, but we need more people working on it, more collaboration with industry, with corporations, more collaborations with governments, more collaborations with nonprofits, more collaborations of any kind, so that we can do research that truly can design things differently. And I emphasize the word design, Leah, because you have helped me discover service design in this century. I'm actually more optimistic about this century than I was about the last century. The last century sucked. I think there's still hope for this century. I'll stop there.
Okay, so I think we should finish. Thank you.